Good morning. My name is Mersida Momeni. I'm the Deputy Regional Director for Southern and East Africa at NDI. On behalf of IRI and CSIS, I'd like to welcome you all here. I'd like to thank CSIS for hosting the event. And I'd like to also thank our speakers for their time and their thoughtful insight into the situation in Zanzibar, the recent elections in Zanzibar. Just a bit of background by way of background. Let me say a few words if I may. When NDI hosted the Tanzanian President Kikwete for an event last September, the international community expected the October 2015 general elections to be free and fair. In many ways, the polls did in fact demonstrate Tanzania's democratic commitment. President Kikwete respected his constitutional term limit and did not run, which is something some other African leaders have unfortunately failed to honor. The opposition coalition also mounted a credible challenge to the eventual winner, CCM's John Magufuli. At least on the mainland, the domestic and international observers noted that despite some flaws, the electoral process reflected the will of the voters. However, when the opposition appeared to be winning in the semi-autonomous Zanzibar archipelago, the Electoral Commission abruptly nullified the results. This cast a shadow over Tanzania's democratic credentials and the future of the islands. A series of negotiations failed to find a solution to the crisis, leading CCM to call for a rerun in March and the opposition CUF to boycott. As a result, CCM won the presidency and complete control of the legislature in Zanzibar, to the dismay of many. Several months on, the path ahead remains unclear. Despite fears of violence and instability, CUF has called on its supporters to remain calm. Despite a sometimes politically turbulent history in Zanzibar, CUF has demonstrated a willingness to compromise in order to bridge its disagreement with CCM. However, the recent process has led to an erosion of confidence in democratic principles among the island's residents. Accordingly, we are faced with questions about the island's political future. So today, some of the questions we'll be exploring will be, how can Zanzibar move beyond the impasse? What are the avenues for a negotiated solution possibly? And is there a role for the international community and international actors to play? Let me turn to introduce our speakers. Today, we're honored to be joined by the former First Vice President of Zanzibar and Secretary General of CUF, Maalim Seif Sharif Hamad. His Excellency has had a long distinguished career as a civil servant and a teacher. He became a member of the Zanzibar Revolutionary Council and the Minister of Education from 1977 to 1980. He's also a founding member of the Zanzibar House of Representatives and a member of the Tanzanian Parliament. He was a member of the Central Committee and National Executive Committee of Tanzania's ruling CCM from 1977 to 87. He was the head of the Economic and Planning Department of CCM from 82 to 87 and a Chief Minister of Zanzibar from February 1984 to January 1989. He was expelled from the CCM in 1989 and was imprisoned for 2.5 years on specious charges of plotting against the ruling party and the union. He emerged from prison into a new era of multi-party democracy to found the Civic United Front, CUF, that I've been mentioning, and has now been the CUF candidate for president for Zanzibar 5 times. Hamad was the first vice president of Zanzibar from 2010 to 2015 under a constitutional reform agreement between CUF and CCM that created a coalition government. We look forward to his comments and the next steps for CUF and Zanzibar. Just a moment more to introduce Ambassador Mark Green, and then I'll turn it over to Jennifer for the discussion. Ambassador Green joined IRI as a president in January 2014. Prior to leading IRI. In 2013, he served as President and Chief Executive Officer of the Initiative for Global Development, a nonprofit organization that engages cooperative leaders to reduce poverty through business growth and investment in Africa. From 2011 through 2013, Ambassador Green served as a senior director at the U.S. Global Leadership Coalition, a network of 400 businesses, non-governmental organization, and policy experts in supporting development tools in American foreign policy. A recognized leader in foreign policy and business communities, Ambassador Green has served as the U.S. Ambassador to Tanzania from mid-2007 to early 2009. While there, he led the mission of more than 350 Americans and Tanzanians and was ultimately responsible for some of the world's largest U.S.-led development programs. Again, thank you all for being here, and thank our speakers. I thank our speakers.
Thank you. Ambassador Green, thank you so much for joining us. Ambassador Green has a global remit, but is extremely passionate about Tanzania and about Zanzibar in particular. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you. Well, first off, it's no secret that Zanzibar is personal to me. In my time as ambassador, I traveled there every month on any excuse I could find. The setting is beautiful. The people are wonderful. It is an absolute treasure around the world. That's why this whole episode of the election cycle is one that I view with great sadness. And I guess I'll offer a few brief observations from several different perspectives. First, putting on my IRI hat as president of the International Republican Institute. You know, at IRI, we believe in democracy and human liberty. We don't pick winners and losers, and we never favor one party over another. We believe in a process. In the weeks leading up to the elections in October, I happened to be in Tanzania, and I met with leaders of all the parties in many different parts of the country. And we talked about the elections that were coming up. We talked about some of the issues that we believed at IRI were important: youth engagement, access by women to the political process. And I thought they were very productive conversations. We believe in competitive elections, elections that genuinely and credibly reflect the will of the people. And right now, together with NDI, IFAS, Internews, our partners in a consortium for democracy, we are working with great pride in Tanzania. We believe in Tanzania's potential. We believe in the future that can be for the entire country, and yes, in particular, for the islands of Zanzibar. Secondly, putting on my hat, my former hat, I guess, as a member of the board of the Millennium Challenge Corporation. I've been off the board for, I think it's precisely 1 week, but was there for 7 years, 8 years' time. It's important to point out that MCC did not suspend the compact with Tanzania. At least I don't view it that way. The government of Tanzania did. The requirements of qualifying for Millennium Challenge Corporation compact are very clear. As many of you know, MCC has been time and again pointed to as one of the most single, transparent agencies in the entire world. You can go to the MCC website today, and you will see those things that are important to qualifying for an MCC compact. And there are two clear, as we call it, hard hurdles with the MCC. Number one is clean government, fighting corruption. And number two is democracy. There's a democracy hard hurdle. We believe that there must be genuinely elections in a system which reflect the will of the people. On top of that, over the course of the last year, there was very specific correspondence from the board of directors of MCC, chaired by Secretary of State Kerry, that talked about important matters to bring up in a conversation between friends. And I think the U.S. and Tanzania clearly are good friends and historic friends. We talked about concerns over the application of a cybercrimes law and how that might be used for political purposes. And we talked about ensuring that steps were taken to provide equal access to democracy and results which people could point to as being credible and fair. And I must pay my compliments to the current ambassador, Ambassador Mark Childress. I think he has done a tremendous job in projecting the values that are important to MCC and to the U.S. government in its dealings. And so I think that the embassy has worked very hard in this process. But finally, and most importantly, I'd like to speak briefly from my perspective as a friend and a fan of Zanzibar. About a year ago, I spoke with a friend of mine who happened to be a member of the Zanzibari opposition. And he said to me, you know, we will have to win this election by a lot because we don't believe that CCM will actually cede power. When he said that, I thought, oh, that's campaign hyperbole. We all understand how politics work. But he said, no, I'm serious. It won't go quietly. We can't just win. We must win by a lot. I spoke to that same friend, Zanzibari, shortly after the ZEC, the Zanzibar Election Commission, annulled the elections when it became quite obvious that CUF was likely to win. And at that point, the conversation was fairly short. It was somewhat emotional. He said to me, Ambassador Belosi, what do I tell my young people? I didn't have an answer. Because for the last number of years, 15 years, 20 years, the answer has always been, well, you must go to the elections. If you have a disagreement with the government, you must campaign. You must win offices. You must go to the ballot box. You must make your case to everyday families across the islands. In the weeks leading up to the rerun of the elections in March, I couldn't find one Zanzibari who believed that CUF would be given a fair chance to win. To be honest, I couldn't find one CCM friend who would look me in the eye and say that. They would usually change the subject. And I think everyone had the sense going into the rerun that it was a predetermined outcome. And that is a great point of sadness. What lies ahead for Zanzibar and Tanzania? I think it's a fair question. Given that friend's question to me, what do I tell my young people? The median age of a Zanzibari is approximately 16. That means you have a very large number of young people in Zanzibar whose only experience with elections is this election and what we've seen in the last few. And so I think the question that leaders of the opposition have to be asking themselves is, how do we look those young people in the eye and say, no, 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 you must participate in democracy. You must get involved in the elections. And that is the question, I think, that the ruling party across the country will have to take on and answer. At IRI, we're developing a program called Generation Democracy, trying to bring young people into the democratic process to make it constructive, because we all believe that's where people should express their differences of opinion. The case gets harder when we have elections that don't fairly represent the will of the people. One point, final point that I'll point to that Maalim Seif made, which I think is quite important. It's important to understand that what you're hearing is not simply the result of the MCC, a single U.S. agency, or just the U.S. government. As he reported, it was a broadly held, supported report that came from the EU looking at the elections. So this is a community-wide opinion. Tanzania is a gorgeous country. It has unlimited potential. And I think Zanzibar can be in many ways the crown jewel. So I think we all have to hope that somehow we can get to democracy, citizen-centered, citizen-responsive government that reflects the will of the people. If so, I think the future is very bright indeed.
Thank you very much, Mark. I wanted to just, is there someone from the Tanzanian embassy here? We had invited, but not sure if they joined. Yes. During the course of the session, we'd like to turn to you as well if you're open to that. I don't know that the ambassador has joined, but listen, first of all, thank you both very much. Maalim Seif, one of the things that you said that I think is important to keep in mind is this is not just about who gets to lead Zanzibar. It's actually about infusing new ideas of what Zanzibar might be economically, a vision of what might benefit. It might be the right one, it might be the wrong one, but it's a new one, and Zanzibaris should have that choice as to what it might mean for Zanzibaris and for Tanzania more broadly. Just one thing I'd like to say. I mean, I was at a conference a few days ago with US policymakers, past and present, each one stating repeatedly at the center of all these interests, security, economic growth, private sector, governance and democracy is our strongest pillar. And I think this is a huge test of what we mean when we say that. If we cannot kind of stand up and sustain that support and attention in a place like Tanzania, which is very close to the United States, as a very friendly, long relationship, big assistance programs, it's very hard to imagine how we do that in other places. So this is not a huge population, although it's significant nonetheless, but it really does matter. The other thing is that the CUF's commitment to peaceful protest should not be a liability for them in getting international attention for democracy. That sends just a terrible precedent to other opposition groups. In Kenya, I don't believe that there would have been the kind of international mobilization in 2007, 2008 if there hadn't been 1,500 people dead. We don't want to see that in Zanzibar. Same with Cote d'Ivoire, where a similar annulment of select precincts in that case took place. It was the fear of violence and the actual outbreak of violence that motivated international community. Why should the US wait for that to happen? It just simply sends that message again and again. You know, as Ambassador Green said, I mean, this does matter, and I really do hope that the US takes this up. I have first a question for Maalim Seif. In terms of the relationship with the opposition on the mainland, two things first. One of the things that you often hear from the Tanzanian government is that this is Zanzibar. There's nothing we can do about it. They're autonomous, or they have their own commission. That's their problem, and I'm sorry, our hands are tied. That's one. And the second, I'd like to ask you about your relationship with Chadema and the opposition coalition on the mainland.
Well, thank you very much indeed for these interesting questions. First of all, I can say that, well, I don't agree with President Magufuli when he says that his hands are tied, that he can't do anything on Zanzibar. Some Zanzibaris ask this question: if he has no such powers, does he not have wisdom to see to it that this impasse is amicably resolved? But Zanzibaris also ask themselves, why did President Magufuli, at the time leading to the rerun of the elections on the 20th March, sent military forces in Zanzibar? Zanzibar was termed as military occupation at that time. And people are asking themselves, why is this? There's no war in Zanzibar. And Zanzibar is very peaceful. But the number of security forces, including the army, the police, security, there were so many. There are some people that said that every 3 or 4 Zanzibaris was protected by one soldier. So the proportion of the security forces vis-a-vis the population was the highest anywhere in the world. So you find, I think this is just an excuse. When they don't want to act to solve this problem. And I can say that what I feel is that the mainland feel that they have to have a regime in Zanzibar which would dance to their tune. I think that is my conclusion, you see. So I don't believe in that. But secondly, on the second question, our relations with Chadema. You know, after the Constitutional Assembly, when it was felt that the ruling party was trying to force its own agenda, the opposition parties made a sort of a cooperation, an alliance, which they called UKAWA. And this UKAWA was mainly composed of CAF, Chadema, NCCR Mageuzi, and NLD. But when the constitution was over, at least they boycotted, all the opposition parties boycotted the process. And it was felt that we should fight the elections with this alliance, what we call is UKAWA against CCM. And indeed, our performance as a group was very good. For the first time, for example, CAF got 10 members of parliament elected in the mainland. All the other elections, the best we could perform was two members. But this time, 10. And as such, you find even Chadema did increase their number. But also we decided to have only one presidential candidate. And that came from Chadema, Lowassa was our candidate. And he performed very well indeed, really. So that relationship still continues as UKAWA, still continues. Because we feel that if we fight separately, then everybody will die alone. But if we fight together, become stronger, and we can challenge the ruling party.
One further question is your relationship with Magufuli. Have you met with him since the debacle? Has he reached out to you, or you reached out to him? And then second, is CCM a monolithic bloc on this issue? Or are there those who have spoken out?
Well, you find at the beginning of this impasse, I tried to meet President Magufuli. I wrote a number of letters to him, about 6, but no letter was replied. But eventually, he said that we should meet. So I met with him once, and it was before the rerun of the elections. And indeed, I presented to him all our evidence that we had won the October 25th election. And our discussion was very, very friendly. And in the end, he said that, all right, if I feel that there may need to meet you again, I shall meet you. But since then, I have not heard from him, although I have continued to write to him that we should meet, but no response from him. So that is the situation. On the CCM, well, you find, I can say that when they are in the public eyes, they seem to be united. But there's talk that there are people who have different ideas and how to resolve. In fact, there are some CCM veterans who have come out very, very openly to say that October 25th elections, CUF won. And we should agree to hand over power to them. Otherwise, we are directing this country to a place where nobody can determine.
Ambassador Green, I wonder if you have remarks also in terms of kind of what you think the U.S. might be able to do. I mean, where is our best leverage and what are our tools in this situation?
Well, first off, let me put all of this in very positive terms. We're speaking in sort of the darker side of it. I think there's a tremendous opportunity for President Magufuli. President Magufuli has taken some important, well-publicized steps to fight corruption, to try to crack down on government waste, and to try to mobilize the economy. I think that he has an opportunity, a statesman-like opportunity, to come in and help produce a result that everyone can point to and believe in. And I think it would be a tremendous boost to his leadership, and it would be a remarkably positive way, still a young president, to get his term underway. So I choose to put these in positive terms. I think there's a remarkable opportunity here for proving that democracy can work. Tanzania is a complicated country. Its constitution is complicated, but I think President Magufuli can take steps to show that democracy is alive, well, and is a core value of its country. And I think that is something that would be a success story, not just for Tanzania, not just in East Africa, but I think something that would be viewed positively all across the continent. Reference was made to Jakaya Kikwete stepping down at the end of his 2 terms, fulfilling the hopes and opportunity of democracy now, I think would extend that story in a very positive way, and again, something that I think we would all look to with great pride. Obviously, I don't speak for the U.S. government. I am former entirely in my status. But again, I think the U.S. government, from what I can tell, is playing a very positive, constructive role. We continue to work on humanitarian issues that are at the core of our foreign policy. I believe we should. I think that's who we are as a people and who we are as a government. I think we should also not shy away from talking about the core value of democracy. And I think it's important to emphasize that democracy isn't simply an American agenda item. Remember why there is a democracy hard hurdle in the Millennium Challenge Corporation guidelines. It's because experience has taught us that for economic growth to be sustainable, for it to realize its potential, experience tells us there are certain core values that should be brought into the government, and citizen-centered, citizen-responsive governance, we believe, is a key part of that. I think emphasizing that in everything that we do and we say is the most important role that the U.S. government can play. And again, in my estimation, I think Ambassador Childress is not shy from doing that.
Thank you. Why don't we open for questions and comments to the audience? No? Yes, gentleman there.
Hello, thank you very much for speaking, Maalim Seif. My name is Brian Weiner with Search for Common Ground. I spent some time in Zanzibar as well, so it holds a very dear place in my heart. But my question is, you mentioned it a little bit in your speech, and I'd like to hear a little bit more about your thoughts on Zanzibar's connection or possible connection to regional violent extremism, and what are the risks, and also what could those actors who are concerned about that issue do do with regards to promoting democracy as well in Zanzibar? Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed for your question. As I cautioned in my speech, you find the majority of Zanzibaris are Muslims. At least 99%, 98% are Muslims.
That's a pretty good majority.
Yeah, but you find it is very tolerant Islam. And in Zanzibar, we have been living together with Christians, with Hindus, and you could not feel that there is segregation or discrimination at all. In fact, people of all communities, all religions were united as Zanzibaris, and they're working together. They were inviting each other in ceremonies. They participated in funerals and things of that sort. So that is a very tolerant Islam. But we have to bear in mind that we have continued with this tolerant Islam because our sheikhs, the Muslim leaders, most of them, they were educated within Zanzibar. But of late, some of our young people go to seek education elsewhere, Saudi Arabia, Sudan, and other countries. And indeed, you find, because the world now is a village, and they know anything which happens here in the United States, the whole world knows it in a matter of seconds. So you find there is indeed what we say that we have in East African coast, we have the Al-Shabaab in Somalia, as well as in coastal Kenya as well. My point is that if these young people continue to be frustrated, to see to it that democracy doesn't work, and remember, these extremist forces could also argue that, tell these young people that democracy doesn't work. You have to come and join us. And we have experiences. Ambassador Green here is a witness of the bombing of the US in 2007, I think. And among those people who are involved in that was a Zanzibari, you see. But also you find after the fall of Taliban in Afghanistan, one Zanzibari was found also in Afghanistan. So you find so far we don't have direct link with this region radicalism. But as I said, that if you frustrate these young people, you make it easier for the radical forces to persuade these people to join their forces there. So that is why we say that we have to ensure that democracy works in our country, because these young men are very vulnerable indeed. They could be persuaded. We have tried to continue to tell them that democracy is the best way. But as I said, that if this continues and people lose hope, if people lose confidence in CAF's leadership, then we have a problem. The peace we have in Zanzibar is because of CUF. The leadership is very mature, tried in the difficult times to face these young people and tell them, as Ambassador Green pointed out, that sometimes it's difficult, you cannot look them in their eyes. But you find, as leaders, we have taken our responsibility as leaders. And that is why we implore the international community to ensure that democracy is established fully in Zanzibar.
Thank you. Questions? Yes, microphone's coming.
Hi, my name is Ladi. You mentioned in passing that the ruling party might be afraid that secession is part of your plans. Do they have any reason, historical or any economic reason, to be scared of that?
Well, I think they don't have any reason. It is just political propaganda. Because what we have seen with the CCM in Tanzania, every time an opposition party becomes strong, then they'll find a jargon so as to destroy them. As you know, give a dog a bad name if you want to kill the dog. So that is exactly what's happening. I'll tell you that at one time we were branded as an Islamic party, a radical Islamic party. One wonders, Islamic party who have been robbed of our victory 5 times, and still we tell people, please keep quiet. And at one time, I remember that President Al-Hassan Mwinyi went to Tanga and told the people of Tanga, CAF is not a Muslim party, it is a national party. Why? Because Tanga, you have many Muslims there. See, because if you say that it's a Muslim party, that would be campaigning for CAF in Tanga. So these things, even this question of secession, they have no background, they have no ground about it. We have made ourselves very clear. We want to redefine the Constitution. And indeed, if the draft Constitution, which was proposed by a panel led by Warioba, if this was passed, then we would have solved a lot of problems there, because we would have a system whereby each party in the union could run its own affairs, except those matters which you have agreed that they should be union matters. But CCM fought very hard to ensure that that draft is not accepted, does not pass through. So you find they don't have that the ground. We have challenged them, said that give us proof that we want to break the union. They have never done that. And I'll tell you that at one time, the late Maalim Nyerere said very openly that CCM's policy is 2 governments leading to 1. Any other party has the right to have its own policy on the union. If CAF, they want 3 governments, it is a right as a policy. So you find something when they feel that they feel the heat, they find ways to give the dog the bad name.
Thank you. Questions? I have one perhaps within Africa. I mean, you've seen Tanzania, unfortunately, and this goes beyond Zanzibar, some rollbacks in kind of the democratic practice in terms of legislation, the cyber law, media laws elsewhere, civil society laws elsewhere. I'm wondering if you've found champions within Africa.
Well, you find we haven't found such champions, and I'll tell you why. Because, as I pointed out, this is ruling party syndrome, you see. In all countries which were called frontline states, except Botswana and Zambia, all other countries, the ruling party has been in power since independence. And they'll try all machinations to ensure that they remain in power. You see, in Zimbabwe, for example, when Shingarai won the elections, what happened there?
Yeah, it's the same situation.
The same situation, you see. So you find all these countries in South Africa, Southern Africa, you find they support each other. There is this saying, if you scratch my back, I will scratch yours as well. So you find all of them, they are working against the opposition parties in their regions. Of course, we are members of Liberal International, for example. So we have some political parties which are also members of Liberal International who have some connections with us. But all of them, they are in the opposition, except in Senegal, I think, where they form the government.
Yeah. And it does strike me that the Senegals, the Cote d'Ivoires, even the Nigerias, which just has gone through such a process, can there be a critical core, at least, of countries within that? Yes, ma'am. Microphone's coming.
Thank you. I'm Michelle Wagner from the State Department. I was wondering if you could talk a little bit more about the status of the constitutional review, the referendum, politically and also with the people of Zanzibar.
Well, as I said, that President Kikwete appointed a commission, first of all, to collect the people's views on the Constitution. And this was led by retired Judge Warioba. They did a very wonderful job. They went to every corner of Tanzania, both in the mainland as well as in the islands. And at every step, they were consulting with President Kikwete. And President Kikwete would give them go-ahead. In the end, you find they handed over their first draft Constitution, the President, and then it was presented in this Constituent Assembly. One would imagine that because President Kikwete had been giving them go-ahead at every step, one would have imagined that you find he would support them. But on the day when this was handed over to him and then presented to Parliament, you find he became a very severe critic of what the Commission had done. But that was CSIS's position, you see. So opposition, Warioba team proposed that we should have three government systems: the government of Zanzibar, government of Tanganyika, and the union government. But CSIS was very much opposed to that, and they wanted to continue with the present system. And because they're the majority, and they were forcing what they wanted to be passed, then the opposition said that we cannot continue to cooperate with them. So in the end, they remained CCM themselves, and they passed what we call is Katiba Pendekezwa, that is constitution, proposed constitution, yeah.
Okay, like a draft, yeah.
Yeah, and what is supposed to follow after that is a referendum, both in the mainland and in Zanzibar. And if people in the mainland vote over 50%, they accept it, and also Zanzibar over 50%, they accept it, then it will be deemed as passed.
Yes, yeah.
Hi, thanks. I'm Denai Rumis from Social Impact. Shikamo.
Marhaba.
My question is whether you can talk a little bit about any mitigating factors that would protect against a possible risk of the mainland looking for sources of political or financial support to substitute for those that have been suspended, such that they can continue with an agenda without the kind of conditions that otherwise would be placed on them?
Well, I find it a difficult question, but we feel that Tanzania as a whole, they would depend very much now on Chinese aid. That is my feeling. Because if they don't get any aid from the Western countries, the traditional, then the Chinese will be invited to fill in the gap. That is what I see. But in spite of that, the aid which they get from the US and Europe is tremendous. And indeed, if they don't get this aid, you find they will have all their programs somehow stopped. And you know that President Magufuli has said that he wants to make Tanzania an industrial country within a short period. So he needs people with experience, investors to come to Tanzania. And if the investment environment is not friendly, then nobody could come. Take Zanzibar, for example. Zanzibar will suffer more, and the people will suffer more, because Zanzibar now depends mainly on tourism. Now, you find with the prevailing circumstances in Zanzibar, and we know that tourism is very sensitive. If there is any sort of disturbance there, people don't want to go to that country. And what we are seeing is that this is the time when we would have tourists coming in, but there are very few, and those who had booked the hotels long, long ago. So you find we shall suffer, you see.
If I can just sort of jump on that. I think it's important to realize that when you work with host country governments, such as the government of Tanzania, rarely do they come to the American government and say, please give us money. It's not the way this process works. U.S. foreign assistance is largely software as opposed to hardware. The Chinese government is known for hardware. They deliver buildings that they plop down in the middle of places. But the U.S. assistance is based upon reforms that welcome in investment. And so I think that regardless of whether another country might bring in buckets of money or drop in buildings, one of the reasons that the U.S. is so sought after is that we tend to build partnerships that reform economies, help countries reform obstacles to investment in a way that hopefully grows an economy to the point of ending the need for the U.S. to provide assistance in the first place. And so I think that when countries say, well, we'll just go elsewhere for our money, they might mean that for a little while. But I think when they realize that a U.S. relationship is about creating opportunities for private investment and private investment-driven growth, it reminds us all why the U.S. plays such an important role, why the U.S. plays such a sought-after role. Again, it gets back to what is it that the U.S. and the U.S. commercial sector believe is key for a prosperous future. Well, citizen-centered government, citizen-responsive government is at the heart of that. That's why I think all of this matters, not just for the values that we all believe in, the importance of one man, one vote, but it's also about growing an economy and creating real economic opportunity for people who need opportunity.
Anything? No. I think we will end there. Listen, I want to thank you so much. I mean, I think Mark put it very well. I mean, no one wants to kind of punish Tanzania, but no one wants to see Zanzibar suffer. And I think couching it as a big opportunity for President Magufuli to show leadership, to profile a democratic credential, to think a bit about his legacy, his standing, and the stature of the country as a whole. I mean, it would be an enormous boon to him personally, and I think to the CCM, were he to take those steps. So I think that was a very good point to make. I hope that all of you will stay engaged on this. I hope that you will engage others. Again, it is not a huge country. It's hard to get attention in the United States policy realm these days. There's a lot going on. But I do think this one has reverberations beyond Zanzibar, across Africa, and really for the United States credibility and democracy promotion more generally. So thank you all for joining us. Thank you to our online audience. This will be posted on the web permanently in probably a couple of days, and we'll send links around as well. Please join me in thanking Ambassador Green and Maalim Seif.